So welcome to the next episode of Rock Pops with a lot of technical difficulties right from the get-go. It's me, Joe Pecora, and Bill Gagliardi, and we have a special guest with us today, Mr. John Disalvo. Please say hello. Yeah, hi, John. So, Bill, what is the episode?
The episode today, I wanted to try to just keep the flow going with the Beatles as a good start, mainly because I feel like it is one of the first formative bands that a lot of us get into. So we did in the last episode an album analysis on Let It Be, and we also did Get Back, which just came out on Disney Plus. So I wanted to have a little fun today, and something that I've always just rolled around was, what if they made another album? And I want to do this a lot in episodes to come, which I'm going to call the post-ultimate episodes, or the post-ultimate albums. Beatles, I feel like they have a lot of post-Beatles material that you could actually make something out of it. So what if the Beatles made another album?
The first thing I thought of that you had mentioned earlier about this was, I don't know if you mean, because you kind of said it, like a collection of the stuff that's post-Beatles or new Beatles material, but in the movie Boyhood, the dad assembles
the Black Album.
The Black Album,
right,
which is, if you look up online, I guess they have clips from the movie and people have assembled it, but you don't mean something like, do you mean that, or you mean...
Well, the thing with the Black Album, because I saw that, I was Googling because I wanted to not really do much work in this. So I was like, oh, awesome. Ethan Hawke's character made that already, so I'm just going to use that. But that is just a greatest hits album from 68, because I think it starts with Wonderwall Music, to, whatever, McCartney 3.
Yeah.
So... that's just a playlist. I'm looking at what if Beatles made another 10 to 14 song album? Maybe they did break up. Maybe they just went on a hiatus. But in the span of 5 years,
now
what is that album going to be?
In your head, do those songs exist and they continue after all that? So they're influenced by all of those experiences and then they get back at it, type of thing. Is that what you're thinking? I'm
thinking a couple of things. These are songs that were in the Beatles' back pockets. These are stuff that they've actually workshopped as a band.
Yeah.
Or just whatever their hits were coming out onto their next solo album or next two solo albums.
Okay. So some of those hits might be in there, but it'll be fleshed out with all those other
Beatles nuances. Yeah. And you would have the production team that was on there. So George Harrison stuck with Phil Spector for All Things Must Pass.
Is that why it's so good?
But however, everybody else had a problem. Paul McCartney had a problem with Phil Spector. Yeah. That's why we had Let It Be Naked.
Tell you the truth, but also George Harrison had a problem with Phil Spector too.
I didn't know about, what is the Let It Be Naked? I don't know about that.
Oh, it's basically stripped of all of the Phil Spectorisms. So Phil Spector for Let It Be only came in the tail end. He wasn't involved in any of the tracking that involved, obviously from many of the songs, obviously if you watch the TV show, but he was involved in adding strings and and
big
vocal
wall
stuff.
Of sound stuff. Or whatever.
Yeah, but there wasn't even a whole lot of that anyway. I kind of I dig the Phil Spector stuff on Get Back. Let It Be Naked is really cool too.
When did that come out?
A couple of years back, maybe 10 years ago.
So it's a 2000s thing. It's not
it was 2002
in the era.
Really? Is it that long ago?
It's been a long time.
But it's something that Paul had a hand in and said this is something I always wanted. I never liked his take. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That's cool though. Gotta check that out.
Sure. Although I kind of feel weird about revisionism from a guy that's 40 years or 50 years removed.
Yeah, and I agree with that. You're not the same perspective. You're not in the same mindset, I guess. Everybody always wants to go and fix up their thing, but what made it special was the time and the place.
Right. You were making that as that person at that point in time, and it's, it kind of should be left as that capsule, whoever ended up having a hand in it. Yeah. But, so here, let me ask you this then. Do you think, because we know about maybe compiling the songs that they would have done from solo albums, but what they were always really good, or especially Paul and John. They were really good at interpreting the time and music as it changed. So, like, say you get this moment where John doesn't have his, like, his like, kind of stripping himself naked and going to his primal self,
right.
and, going back to the rock and roll roots and stuff. And say they kind of, like, found their footing again and found their flow, like, would we eventually have gotten a Beatles disco album? Like Creatures of the Night from, like, Kiss.
I mean, they did psychedelic. It might have been, or it would have been like something different, like, because they always managed to add that English, like, flair in the background. So imagine it would be. I think it would be more like how the Clash approached disco.
Sure, I can see that. I think from John's perspective, sure,
and that definitely would play a role, because I don't think they would lose the rock and roll, and I don't think they would lose the English perspective. I think, like, if in my head what the Beatles doing disco would look like would be a cross between, like, the Bee Gees and the Clash.
Right, but at the same time, now when you get to, like, punk rock, everybody would have been dinosaurs. They would the Clash and all of them were all, like, even though they loved the Who,
they wouldn't even touch
they hated the Who.
Somewhere else. Yeah.
Right.
I feel like more that they would go more so in the arena rock vein.
Yeah.
Which a lot of bands were doing at the time.
They never really found their footing in that thing, so it would be a good time to break into it too. You know,
you look at all the other solo albums.
Yeah.
Like, Paul was huge into it.
Yeah, Wings.
John was the only one who was, like, really modest with it.
No, but he did, like, Concert for New York City, whatever it was called. So he did do big events too. So, like, I never thought of that really, because I always saw the Beatles as this band who just never played, basically. But in terms of solo acts, they did all independently go into that.
And then he was writing with Bowie and everything too at that point too.
And even John started even before they broke up. He was, they did, like, the Dirty Mac during that rock and roll circus.
Yeah.
What is that, 68?
So, like, they would probably, go more with the spectacle. Like, even George Harrison, who would probably be more scaled down, when you got to, like, Cloud 9 in the 80s, it was, like, all the big drums and everything. Like,
But that's weird, too, though, because Cloud 9 is... That's an ex-Beatle influenced by somebody who was really influenced by the Beatles, and
that's when Jeff Lynne got involved.
Jeff Lynne was involved in Cloud 9, so, like, and even John Lennon said that ELO
would have been the next Beatles.
Was what the Beatles would have sounded like.
Yeah, which I did take that in consideration, because you look at the two songs that came out in Anthology, which was Free as a Bird and Real Love. Would that have been what they would have sounded like in the 70s?
Oh, you know what's fucked up? To add to that point is that there's an interview I just heard with not Jeff Emmerich, the other guy,
John Glenn?
Nope, Ken Scott, and Ken Scott said nobody called me when they were making those songs.
Ken
Scott was one of the engineers. He was a producer. Ended up becoming producer for, like,
which
for
songs
Bowie
did they do?
and for Free as a Bird and for when they did the anthology they did.
They did those extra songs in the late 90s or whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah.
So Ken Scott said, well, when they did Free as a Bird, they took a literal cassette tape of John Lennon, put that in and used that. And Ken Scott's like, why? I have, like, versions of him singing it into, like, a Neumann microphone, and it sounded like it was cool. If anybody just would have asked me, we could have used it.
Cut him out of the loop?
Yeah.
That's so strange.
So they had good quality of it.
Yeah.
In theory, I guess they could still do that,
Right. Well, now it's done. And everybody was mad about it anyway.
Yeah. I think, though, the ELO approach is really interesting, because it kind of splits the difference between, like, not, quote, disco, but, that synthy, dancey thing, but also with the Beatles' songwriting in that template, it would have been a whole other world.
Sure.
Well, I mean, like, you look at Paul's first solo album, right? Not going into, like, Ram or anything, but, like, you look at McCartney. I keep on doing that.
McCartney
he did that all on his own, like, in his home studio. But you also have Maybe I'm Amazed on that album, too. So, which is the...
That was recorded in his home studio?
Yeah. that whole thing was on his own. It was the dick move that pretty much was like the straw that broke the camel's back with the Beatles, because he actually, what was it, like 2 weeks before Let It Be was released, he released that.
So maybe I'm amazed. Is a solo song?
Yeah.
It's also probably
That's a beat. That sounds. That's a
I always
Beatles
thought it was
song.
a Beatles song, but it was also
I thought it was until just now.
one of my least favorite Beatles songs when I thought it was a Beatles song.
Well, that's like, I mean, the real question is, this album that they would come out with, this post-Ultimate album, is it good?
I think they have to come out with two of them. Honestly, you got to get that bad one out where you're in that bumpy patch, maybe, and then like you come back, you find it again. But
Well, in my world,
I don't think. Well, you go for it.
Oh no! In my world, they did break up, but like they took
They
like
come
a
back together.
3 or 4 or 5 year hiatus, and they're like, okay, look, we got these ideas. We never recorded any other albums, because my list actually has solo songs on it, and boy, Ringo comes in and like saves the day in my album.
it's the No song. Yeah.
No, it's not on it, but there's a lot of Ringo songs.
But that's kind of like I guess one of the good parts, if you want to say good about it, is that they didn't get a chance to be bad. You know, we have somebody like Bowie, and I love Bowie, but it's like there's too many albums, you know?
Yeah.
But I guess it's just Bowie, so what are you going to do? You could say, like, you know, he's not a band, he's a guy.
Yeah.
But he it's just after a while, you got to tell somebody, like, listen to this band, but not after album X.
Right.
You know, there's always that conversation.
Yeah, it's like the Weezer
With the
thing.
Beatles, you don't have to say that. You just say which is the best album of all of them, because they're all great, basically. You can't go wrong, really. You know, there are ones people like more than others, but
It just depends on what flavor of Beatles you want.
yeah, but they're all good in their own right. I mean, there are ones that are better than others, like I said, but they're all great.
If you're in the mood for like more classic rock and roll, you go pre-Rubber Soul. You know,
Yeah.
What's interesting too is like Paul's songwriting in like from I'd say like the White Album on. Like I don't know how to like. I was listening to Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, you know, with the girls, and I'm like, who writes? Like, who would write a fucking song? It's great.
It's the Englishness. I'm telling
Right,
you.
I know, I get it. It's like that. It's
They-
that songwriting style
For
of like
them-
being in a pub and everybody singing around a piano.
That would be like, which maybe we did. I don't know. I'm thinking that's their nostalgia. That's them calling back to like their childhood and traditional songs that they grew up with and styles of their. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see that, but I don't see the. I guess my thing is I don't see the direct correlation between a Paul McCartney song in like the early '70s to those to that
might have been them
influence.
egging each other on, because like maybe it was John that was more like the let's play around with the Queen and the you know, like it might have been that, like maybe Paul wasn't into it, maybe it was one of the other ones.
Well, no, I mean, but Paul, I'm saying like because you know that Uncle Albert is a Paul song.
Yeah.
So like
Just
on solo.
you think?
No, I mean I'm just saying like how did somebody write kind of a song? It's just a weird thing. It's just a weird kind of like style to create. Which I'm glad it was created. I dig it, but like it's just weird.
It's very cool, yeah.
So okay, so let's go back to the post-Ultimate album. Are we talking how many albums would there be?
I'm thinking this is their last one. This is the thing where it's like, we broke up. Let's give this one more
They
shot.
come back for a double album.
It's a double album.
Double album?
Mine's no.
Okay.
Mine is
Regular
just
I think because they were like sworn off of the double album from White
12 tracks or something, or 15?
I have 12.
Okay, 12.
But
it's a good album.
You know, there are a lot of bands where like they do break up, where they go on a long hiatus and they come back. They try to do another album. Well, that was the other thing, and they wanted to start playing live again, and that's what Get Back does.
Yeah,
and that's what they all did after they broke up. They're like, hey, it's so much easier to not do the whole big Beatles show. I remember I was watching a documentary when David Gilmour started touring again, and Rick Wright, the keyboardist from Pink Floyd's like, this is just David's show. This is just us playing the music, and that's it. We don't have to do the glitz and the glam of like Pink Floyd and the whole light show and everything, because that's exhausting. So there's a lot less pressure when it's just the Beatles.
Yeah.
I mean, when it's just the individuals. But they were trying to push for that in Let It Be or Get Back.
Yeah.
And Then they just had a bunch of other songs. They made Abbey Road. Then they put Let It Be. You know, they meal pieced that together, and then that was it.
That's why I keep thinking about it, maybe also why it's in my head about the 2-album thing is like, they thought they were going to do 1 album in that set, and all of a sudden it became 2 because the vibe was different. I don't know, whatever it was.
They think they were just hard pressed for time, and they had to get the Let It Be stuff out.
Yeah.
And then they started doing Abbey Road, which
But
they
I
also
like
started doing, like, because you see, like, Me, Mr. Mustard, and like that, the whole, like, she came in through the bathroom suite and everything. They're writing in those sessions. But
I like the idea of they break up because it still leaves us with what we have, like the 70s stuff, where it's like they did this, they went on their journey. You know, John, maybe he did his thing and he came back to it and whatever. And there's a little bit of the Wings maybe stuff. When did Wings get together? Later than that, right? 80s?
No, 73, right?
Oh, so, all right. So that could have been like a little taste of that, like what he explores there. And then they come back, like when they're ready, and then this album comes out.
I think it's like an interesting alternate theory to take on this is that we witnessed them all sucking at some point, right? So how powerful would it be for that second, and say there was a second album, comeback album after that, how powerful would it be if they all sucked together?
It was like,
album?
oh no!
Yeah, every single element of it.
But that's my fear about something like that is like, oh, the Beatles are great. You just don't listen to that comeback album. I don't want that to be the case. It needs to be good.
But although to kind of like veer away from the Beatles a little bit, I think there is comfort in having I would rather have a band like Weezer really fucking suck and own it. And just own it like, hey, look, we're not the band that you want us to be anymore. I'm doing this thing. I like doing this. Cool. And they've just like, Rivers Cuomo has just done a steady stream of diarrhea for years.
But he loves it.
And it's okay. And I feel like I am at peace with that.
Yeah.
It's like the Star Wars movies. It's like the sequels. It's like, wow, okay, this is great. I don't have to feel precious about this thing anymore because that's exhausting. It's exhausting to think like your idols, you know, you have this like this drive for this thing that they did, and it's exhausting to feel like, oh man, if they just would have made one more album, if Jimi Hendrix didn't die, blah, that's exhausting. Like just let them suck, and you can, and then just fade into the night.
But the good thing about like what Weezer has done, and what we're going to put Weezer and Star Wars in the same basket. It's like, oh yeah, your expectations are getting lower and lower and lower. But then there's just like one gem here and there. Like, Everything Will Be Alright in the end was like, they tried to call back. And they didn't, like, to the first 2 albums. But there was like 1 or 2 songs where it's like, oh wow, yeah, this is old Weezer. Same thing with Star Wars. It's like, okay, the last 3 movies were shit.
Right.
But The Mandalorian comes out and it's like, that's great.
Oh, wow.
Baby Yoda's fantastic.
I'm never going to get into that one.
No, that's.
I could go on another tangent about it, but I'm trying to relate it to the Beatles. How can we do that?
I mean, I think it's fine. But I think like
no, you just have a person who like a franchise, you know, that is held in such high regard.
My idea with that one, real quick, if we could tie it back, is a too many cooks in the kitchen idea, where it's like nobody cared about the Mandalorian. Going to tie it back, hopefully. Nobody cared about the Mandalorian. It was new. It was different. It wasn't a big franchise character, so they kind of gave the person creative control. And usually when you give somebody creative control, a director, to see their vision to fruition, things are good. Things are better. So like, can that relate to this? Like maybe the Beatles album would suck because too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing. Like people are too excited about it, too modern, you know?
Well, that's like Ringo's self-titled album. He, after they broke up, he came out with like 2, like I'm singing like standards types albums.
Is that real?
Then he did Ringo's like all-star band, and he co-writes a song with George Harrison. He has one of his own solo songs. He co-writes a song with Paul and Linda McCartney, and then he also like George, Paul, and Ringo open up the album with a song that was written by John Lennon, but he's not on it. So it's like there's your next Beatles album, and all the songs I mentioned, that's actually, I do have a list of 12 songs, and all 4
Is it a Ringo album?
Yeah, it's a Ringo album.
What album?
It's just called Ringo Starr, I think, right? From 1973?
Yeah.
It's good. It's got Photograph on it. It's got 6 O'Clock, which is the Paul McCartney song. It's got I'm the Greatest. which was John. That's the John Lennon song. That's my opener
he
on
would
my
write that.
post-Ultimate album because that's kind of like the Sgt. Pepper's, especially if you have a long hiatus.
So your post-Ultimate album does do the Black Album type of thing.
It does do the Black Album thing, but
there's like gaps that you feel like would be filled in had things still worked out.
I'm also setting a deadline.
Okay.
Where the Black Album just goes all the way until
So that's
the 80s.
one of my questions I was thinking as you guys were talking. So ideally, which year or time period would this album drop? Is it a late 70s album?
1975.
He's got it planned.
The album is called 75 because I was trying to figure out a name for this album and
Do they brush shoulders with the likes of the other touring acts in the 70s in your head? Like Springsteen maybe, or like Pink Floyd is doing their thing, or Alice Cooper? Do they play with these guys, or are they different on a different circuit?
No, they're
Or
the
Bowie,
Beatles.
for that matter. Like, did they get glamorous?
Beatles.
Who opens for the
What about the
Beatles though in
Stones?
75 or 76 on the tour?
Oh, man.
This is what I'm saying.
Joe help.
Klaatu.
All right, so
There you go.
so maybe I don't know what that is. What is that?
Okay, so I was waiting for that opening. All right, so Klaatu was like,
Since the beginning.
so I think it came out around 75 too, around that time. So it might have been earlier. So this song came out that was called "Calling All Interplanetary" something, whatever. I don't remember the name of the song, but it's a great fucking song.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the Beatles. It sounds like you know how like ELO like sounds kind of like the Beatles, but it's different.
Yeah.
Or like,
This sounds like it could be the
Mott the Hoople
Beatles.
and David Bowie.
Right. Well, that's a tougher one because there's
He's
David
in the
Bowie
band.
writes for and he's singing in the song. But anyway, they had this song and it went under the title Klaatu, but they were like a no-name band and there was very little press on them, and people heard the song and were like, it's the Beatles.
Oh,
They
yeah.
got back together, it's the Beatles. And
Yes.
for like a year, people were like, oh,
I love that
it's
about
the Beatles, the Beatles, the Beatles. And it was like, no, it's just these couple of schmucks who wrote like a pretty cool album, but
Like
it's
Oasis.
not the Beatles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And I guess that makes a lot of sense because when you have these big swinging acts at that point, it's like the arena rock era. You can't have another main headliner. You'd have to have somebody.
Well,
Did those bands play together like the arena rock bands?
Well, I think you got to think of what we know as arena rock is different then. So arena rock doesn't really become like arena rock until the mid '80s.
Okay.
Like
we're at the
having
dawn of arena rock here. Though.
right.
Like,
It
this
starts getting bigger and bigger. Like they don't even have sound systems really that are
Yeah.
able to handle that.
Yeah.
Like Woodstock was like a big like awakening for we need to
We
figure
need
out a
to
better
make
way to like
equipment for these people.
Yeah.
right. And so it goes from like the arena rock concept like comes from like a Woodstock kind of thing where it gets or if you go from like the pop festivals and stuff
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that, and then you get to Woodstock and it's really big and people are like, oh wow, well this sells and we're gonna keep doing these kind of things, and then you get to like where it's real rocky because nobody really knows how to really handle it.
Yeah.
Like if you watch documentaries from the late '70s of like Fleetwood Mac or the Stones, or I can even remember my older brother telling me like one of the first concerts he went to was like in '83 or something. I think it was a Yes. And he said, I remember when he came home, he's like, it was crazy. You can never go to a big concert because it's crazy. Somebody was throwing blockbusters from up on the top, and he's like, so
At
people
that point, it probably was.
yes, they were doing that, and they were like people
Like,
were
I
able
was-
to bring in like bottles, and there was like bottles
Yeah.
being thrown and stuff. But just picture like 50,000 people doing that.
And what year was this?
Which one, my brother or the?
When they were
That was
blockbusters.
83.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was watching a documentary about the '86 Mets, and people were shooting fireworks out of the stands in Shea Stadium.
Yeah.
Like wild. Like
Yeah.
imagine.
That was
Be
huge with
scared to
Pink
go
Floyd,
somewhere.
too. Pink Floyd, like Roger Waters wrote the whole Wall album because,
Right,
he
because
flipped
of
out
the-
on somebody lighting fireworks at a stadium show.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I'd rather you throw a bottle at me.
Yeah.
You know, like, throw it at my feet.
Won't hurt me too much.
That might be a fun episode too. Is like we just sit and look at YouTube and find like all the times that artists got pissed off because somebody threw shit at them.
Yeah.
There's some really good ones.
You got over 1,000 people looking at you. Somebody's going to throw something
I've
at
never
you.
looked at those videos, so I think it's better, you know.
Oh, it's fun.
But
anyway.
I see like a a post Peter Gabriel Genesis. Like Trick of the Tail came out in '76, so like they were kind of in that transition phase there, and like I mean they were still trying to go for the more prog rock, but like they were merging more into pop music.
Right.
So like Collins is taking over around that time too. So they would be a good opening act.
What do you think? Oh, this is another tangent. What about this? It plays out this way.
Okay.
They have another album, comes out in 75.
Yeah.
Everybody goes wild for it, even though it's probably not really that great, but it's really, everybody's really happy.
They want to like it.
Right, everybody's really digging
That's
it.
most of the music I listen to these days.
Sure, yeah. So, like, say that happens, and then John does filter off.
Does his own thing.
George takes a more lead role in the band.
George
We
Paul.
add in a new member, Jeff Lynne.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Eric Clapton.
Eric Clapton.
Who's Jeff Lynne?
From ELO.
Oh, yeah.
But let's say Eric Clapton. We throw in Eric Clapton. Now what? What's the next? What's that album?
Or Tom Petty. Just get any Traveling Wilbury in there.
Now we're getting
Tom Petty is still like
because
he's
of the
still
Wilburys.
finger banging girls in the
16.
swamps of Tallahassee.
Because of the Wilburys connection. I don't know. I think it would be cool, but I think people would rebel against it. Because then it's like a Wilbury scenario. It's like just invite people in.
But would they? Because now we're talking about 77, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about not even a full 10 years.
Also, like, we are really romantic about the
Yes.
Beatles because they're the Beatles.
Right.
At that point, who cares? Like,
Right.
Kids in 77 don't care about the Beatles.
No, they don't. As a matter of fact, kids in 77 are already like rebelling against the Beatles.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like the band my dad likes, and they're still around.
Right.
It's like how the Foo Fighters are now. Like, like you stuck around, and it's like it was cool for a while, and now it's getting old.
That's a different. But I could just have an episode where I'll just talk by myself about how much I don't like the
one
Foo
time
Fighters.
I saw the Foo Fighters, the way this show started was Dave Grohl walked out to this small stage that was in the audience, and his acoustic guitar came down from the ceiling, and there was a spotlight on it the whole time.
Oh man,
And he grabbed it and he just started playing. So,
that's pretty epic.
but that's sort of the reason why,
Yeah.
right? Is that you don't like the.
I saw him I saw them like right around the time they opened up for the Chili Peppers. No, it was Chili Peppers. It was them, somebody else, and Chili Peppers, and it was right after Color and Shape came out, and that was amazing.
Yeah.
It was so good, and then it just got so bad.
Yeah.
And then we have like this. What is this movie? 666, whatever.
Studio
Yeah, whatever
666.
that is. Yeah.
I like the Foo Fighters, but yeah, it's the persona, I guess. Like, not to get too off, but I like the documentary Sound City a lot.
Sound City, Sonic Highways.
But like
Sonic Highways pisses me.
the first half of Sound City is amazing. Once you get to the second half, where it's like all of them in his house jamming, and it's like Stevie Nicks just wailing.
Yeah.
It's like, I get it, guys.
Yeah.
It's over.
Right.
I
think that goes back to the idea of like of the band dying off. Like all of those artists just
Hopefully
like
the
kind of
Beatles
like dying off.
75 album is not that.
Right.
Look, we get it, John. Go home. But honestly, I don't think so, because they were all still making really, really great music. They still had fuel in the tank well into the 70s.
Yeah. Well, you look at the stuff that they were workshopping in Get Back that ended up on their solo albums. Like, one of the songs that I put on my list was Child of Nature, which became Jealous Guy. So, like, now if you throw that in 75 and it wasn't really started an album yet, because Jealous Guy doesn't come out until Double Fantasy, right?
Another song
No,
that
Jealous
I
Guy is-
assumed or thought was a Beatles
Oh yeah.
song.
Jealous Guy comes out in Double Fantasy. So he workshopped that for 11, 12 years. So now
No, Joe's Guy's on. It's on Imagine, isn't it?
I'm thinking Watching the Wheels. Yeah, Jealous Guy's on Imagine.
But it's a Lennon solo song.
yeah,
That's another one that could have easily been a Beatles song.
yeah. It almost was. It was Child of Nature. They had a demo of it. So like you think of like here he is just playing guitar, and it beefs up into something more Beatlesy, but more on the Child of Nature side, not the Jealous Guy side. You got a good song there.
No, I'm into it.
Same
No, they
thing with,
still
like-
had fuel in the tank in the 75. They could have made a really good album, I think.
Yeah.
Especially if they had each other to balance each other out.
Yeah.
Because like that's one of the problems is with the I don't know about the Wings stuff. Paul McCartney had a really had a lot of people around him that were really great. But like the Lennon stuff, I love John Lennon, and it gets a little
Yeah.
too much in,
No.
in the corners.
Yeah, I mean, he goes like he leans a little bit too much on the rock and roll part, and it kind of like gets a little.
He's trying to
Yeah.
reclaim something, but he was playing with Chuck Berry as like his hero, so I get it.
Did you ever watch that the of them on? I don't know.
And they turn off Yoko's mic.
Oh yeah, and you just see like she goes like some kind of like, and like Chuck Berry kind of goes, ooh, and he just like makes a face. It's like on live television.
So you with Chuck Berry.
But like, how great would like "It Don't Come Easy" sound as a Beatles song? Because that's another one. Like you thought that maybe Liz was a Beatles song. I thought "It Don't Come Easy" was. As
George
well.
Harrison though shined so bright in that era. Like
Yeah.
the George songs, I think hit me the most. Even though you know, Paul and John, yeah. But the George songs of that era are the ones that like.
He was pitching "All Things Must Pass" too. Like,
And the
that would've been
production on those are really, really modern too, in terms of like, I don't know, just
Which ones?
the George songs, like
Of you mean like For Abbey Road?
no, his solo stuff.
His solo stuff.
Like you know what? It's just like so big
Yeah.
and so like I don't know. The emotion drives so well. It just and it's like chaotic but in a clean way. Like I love that era of it. Whoever he was working with, and I think that he would, like you said, maybe he would take a lead role. He definitely would have been a driving force in the '70s stuff, or at least we would have hoped that they would have gave him more of a role.
Yeah.
That's what. Like I was starting this album on a George song. Actually, I was starting it off with "Let It Down," like just like having that like big.
So do you have the
Grand
album? Is it
intro.
available for download?
I mean, you could go into my Spotify account. It's part of my playlist.
That's
So
very good. We're gonna
So
look at it.
we're gonna that's public.
Oh, yeah.
So enjoy it, I guess.
Yes.
But like other songs, like think about like 1985 as a Beatles song.
It's great for
Like because also they were playing with Billy Preston at the time too.
Yeah.
So like, what if he got more and more involved?
Well, that's another thing we didn't even consider. Billy Preston joining the band.
Yeah, which they considered.
I don't know Billy Preston.
Well, so did you watch? You didn't watch Get Back?
I didn't watch Get Back.
Oh, my
you
God.
gotta watch Get Back.
I know.
Or listen to the last episode.
It's great.
I want to watch the whole thing.
And don't
Yeah,
worry,
sure.
we're getting all the Beatles stuff out now, so we could worry
Yeah,
about other
that's
bands
it.
later.
That, for the one listener that we have, Mom, we're not going to do this for every episode.
This isn't a Beatles podcast, but the first two episodes are.
Now, in your hypothetical,
Yes.
does John Lennon get shot?
I mean,
Is he still dead in the 80s? Or do they do this album and we're like happy we had this last album, but history is the same? Like the only thing that changes, the Beatles did a.
I mean, I wasn't planning that, but I mean, if the Beatles are
So do
going to
you
keep
feel-
going, like, are we doing one album and
I
then
want to know
that's
right
it?
now,
Or-
I'm killing John Lennon.
I'm going to say, look, I'm going to jump in there and say no, he doesn't die.
Okay.
Because
History changes.
history changes, and then Chapman maybe isn't so pissed off.
Yeah. He doesn't read Catcher in the
My mind is
Rye. He
going-
reads like I don't know, Fahrenheit 451 or something
Yeah.
instead.
Mine is going in a million different directions. I don't know how far you want to take that.
Let's go.
What happens with Oasis then if the Beatles are still around and John Lennon is alive? Like, what if A, are they a band even, and B, what relationship do they have to the real Beatles?
Oasis comes more of a Britpop band like Blur, and John Lennon is the producer.
You think that he has a hand in it? He digs it though. You think he digs it?
Sure.
Joe thinks something else.
I think no. I think no. You see, because I have like a thing against Oasis. I feel like Oasis is cool and all.
You punched him right once in a bar.
No. Okay, tell that story. Yeah. No. So anyway, I came close though, just for fun.
You almost punched him in a bar.
Right, but I would never do that. That's not me.
You're a nice guy.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think though that changes the whole thing. Like, so I think it changes the arc of like
Changes
the way
the-
music
changes the
goes.
90s.
Changes the 90s. Incredible. It changes the 80s.
Yeah.
So like, if they don't, they're still going to be big because we have tons of bands that were like the Stones existed for forever, like
Yeah, yeah.
cockroaches, and
I love that though about bands like that. Yeah.
but we still I have separated the Stones from like 81
Bowie
to
did the
now.
same thing with you compartmentalize Bowie.
Right.
You know.
But how would them existing through into the 80s and still putting out some crappy music, how would that like taper how we get into the 90s?
Well, it's absolutely going to diminish their past work.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
not
my
gonna be as
fear of
appreciated.
that. Like I said,
Yeah.
you know.
But it doesn't though, because it doesn't. It didn't diminish Ziggy Stardust. It didn't diminish any of. It didn't diminish.
I think that he's an outlier though. He pulled something off that I don't think a lot of people can do.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that.
I guess who else has done it? You could say right like.
I don't know. I see. This is a Bowie conversation.
It's a
that me and you have a lot of
Springsteen
times.
thing, too.
There's that do stuff
Because
later
think about
on. There,
Springsteen is still making albums. Who's listening to him? You know, like I might take a listen, but it doesn't diminish the fact that maybe Darkness on the Edge of Town is an awesome album.
Dylan is another great example.
Dylan,
right?
like what the hell is Dylan doing? You know,
Right.
He's making albums,
just
but
sold his-
I'm still listening to
he just
Freewheeling and
Right. You know, how
His
it
there's
says
a lot
catalog.
of other tracks. You know?
Yeah.
so I guess I take it back. Yeah, you're right.
But who knows? Like, who knows? Like, how that would factor and change things? You know, there was I feel like there must have been some kind of impulse of like, because things really like music and styles changed really radically from like 75 to like say 83.
Hip hop. How do you think hip hop would have influenced the Beatles?
The Beatles would have been doing hip hop.
Oh man, could you imagine?
John Lennon would have been right in there because
could you
Bowie
imagine
got
him
in there.
rapping?
Bowie, Blondie,
Paul worked with Kanye. You know, like
and that song was pretty cool.
yeah.
No, but not even that late. I mean, like in the '80s, I think that John Lennon would have been rapping because he didn't give a shit. Like,
Yeah, he would have tried
Think
it
so?
out.
I don't know. I mean, like the other guys were like Paul
I'm
was like
not saying it
always.
would be good. No,
Yeah.
not as the Beatles, but John Lennon.
No, but I mean, like Paul existed in that time, and Paul was always trying to be on the tip of whatever was happening
Yeah.
at the moment, and he knew like well enough not to rap.
Not to get into it.
Yeah.
But I don't think John did know that. I think he just wanted to be on the vanguard of whatever movement was happening.
You think? But I mean, like, look at the rest of our classic rock heroes. None of them rapped.
I mean, Bowie didn't, but he made Mickey Rourke do it,
Yeah.
Right. Because
which is funny.
Aerosmith.
yeah, an 8-ball and some whiskey will get Mickey Rourke to do anything in the 80s.
But yeah, maybe. But I think he definitely would have been influenced by the hip hop.
What are they doing?
But John Lennon was more of a on the streets kind of like, ear to the ground guy.
Yeah. What are they doing as far as producers? Are they going to stick around with George Martin, or like are they going to rotate now?
I think they would rotate.
So
they
like,
wanted to get away from George Martin to begin with.
So you're going to get an
That's what Led
Alan
B was.
Parson Beatles album? You're going to get like
Maybe.
that'd be cool. Alan Parson one, are we doing Rick Rubin? Like early days Rick Rubin does the Beatles? Because I mean, Nigel Godrich did one of the better Paul McCartney albums.
Yeah.
And
Rick Rubin did a Paul McCartney one, did he?
did?
Didn't he? Didn't he
did
do
you
one of
Flaming
them?
Pie?
I
I
don't
got
know. I thought he
I
worked. Whatever.
We'll look that up. Somebody
Rick
email us for
Rubin
that.
really doesn't work with anybody. Rick Rubin like shows up every once in a while, uses the bathroom in the back of the studio. Like if you listen to like any engineers who have ever worked for Rick Rubin, like Rick Rubin does very little.
I was
At
like,
least he
In terms
has.
of producing, like
Yeah, I
the
mean-
advice that he gives.
Yeah, I think like from like maybe like the mid '90s on, like Rick Rubin was
So they
there.
pay him and he shows up and he takes credit, but he kind of just like gives like very fleeting suggestions, you're saying?
And he kind of like guides things, but he's like more like people usually give him the Svengali kind of like thing.
He's not very hands-on.
Right. But at the same time, that's the same thing with Phil Spector around the time of Let It Be.
Yeah.
And the same thing with John Lennon's album.
He's the sprinkles, he's not the cake.
Right. So he wasn't even like, for Imagine, he wasn't even at most of the sessions for Phil Spector.
wow. So like once they cross into the 90s, we're going to get Steve Albini involved and...
Oh, yes.
That would be an awesome album.
I think there's definitely, that would be like, I think that would be a pretty good Let It Be type album.
Yeah.
Because that would be pretty, like, bare bones and like
It's just like
noisy.
a Doolittle, but like Beatles. Did he do Doolittle?
No, that was Gil Norton.
Oh, okay.
He did
Surfer
Surfer
Rosa.
Rosa, yeah.
Right. Still, like, you get like that, like a Surfer Rosa in utero, but Beatles album. I like it. I'm there for it.
Yeah, sure. I think, you know what though?
Let's get the Beatles
do
to the
that.
90s.
Beatles in the 90s.
Beatles in the
Steve
90s.
Albini.
Beatles in the 90s is a cool name for a band.
It's like in Wayne's World, the shitty Beatles. Are they any good? They suck.
But I want an early 2000. Then if that's the case, and we're still going, because the Stones are still going, then I want an early 2000s Dave Friedman album. That would be amazing.
Oh, man. Yeah, all of this would be fantastic.
But now I think we're playing.
But how
more
many
with,
shitty albums would there be?
A million of them.
yeah.
I think now we're playing with
The 80s
more
were
of
shitty.
a John Lennon didn't die concept than a Beatles did another.
We
album
saved his
concept.
life. You got the Beatles back together.
You saved his
Well,
life.
how did we get them back
Joe
together?
saved his life.
I think the only way we get them back together then is like there's a tragic car accident and Alan Klein dies.
I think it's.
Oh, I was just gonna say that Bob Geldof got them back together because that's what he does.
Oh, right, Live Aid.
Live
So
Aid.
maybe that would be it.
Let's
So
do
maybe
Live Aid.
75 happens.
Bono got
They
them
break up. They break up and then they come back for Live Aid.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
And then that album after Live Aid really sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, Live Aid was what, 86?
85.
85? Yeah. What was good in 85?
Well, I
Not until
mean-
like 87. 87 was when we started getting like better albums. Like this one, Appetite came out, and
Yeah, you're talking in the mainstream, right? So,
Yeah.
but you have you have an undercurrent of awesome through the '80s, yeah, but it's just undercurrent. That's what built the '90s into the 2000s. But I think they would play like Zeppelin played Live Aid, and it sucked balls. It was terrible. They weren't prepared for it. I think the same thing probably would have happened with the Beatles, and then even like a band that was on the top the top of their game at that point, which was was Queen. That's really the last good Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Live Aid.
Yeah, and then it's just
Innuendo and
trash. But it's also like him dying.
Yeah.
Like anyway, I just need to say this at some point on the podcast is that I think the worst rock and roll song ever is the song "Headlong" by Queen.
Okay.
I need as long as we're saying that, I need to get that out.
You put that out there.
It is
Now
the
that-
worst fucking song.
Now they know.
Now they know.
I mean, I don't know
I
if you've
don't know
heard it.
the
Yeah,
song. I will go
listen
listen
to
to
on the
it.
way home, and then I want you to
Trust
text me and let me know how much it
Trash.
sucks.
Like, thank you for wasting my time. But yeah, I don't know. You guys got anything else on this?
Billie Eilish and
And
John
Billie
Lennon.
I think
Say
it
a
could have
duet.
worked out. Yeah, I like it.
Honestly,
I think I would say it probably would have been more. I could see that too. I kind of like dig her vibe.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean the previous album, the Where Do We Go When We Fall Asleep?
I don't know her albums, but I know that I think Lennon would respect her and what she's doing.
Spin Magazine would ask John Lennon what he thought,
And he's like I think that he's one of those guys that's always into like the new and up and coming thing.
Yeah.
That's not necessary. You know, I think that he would be into it. You know.
He would have been like doing duets with her, like how like Elton John's doing with Dua Lipa now and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Auto tune the fuck out of him.
Oh
You know?
man, auto-tune John Lennon.
I think his voice is kind of like I think he's fried.
With the Elton John thing.
Yeah, I don't think he's
You know-
able to really sing anymore.
Because he didn't even sound like that in the '90s when
No.
he was singing those Disney songs or whatever. Like he sounds like a weird young version of himself, right?
Yeah, because but you can hear the hoarseness. And it's like
Yeah.
when you try to like auto tune
Somebody who's raspy. is
raspy,
like-
it's
and,
it's rough. It's really hard.
I still think it's cool. Like I appreciate I appreciate it, but
Sure.
like, it's kind of strange.
But yeah, if you have any post-Ultimate albums that you would like to talk about or anything,
The audience.
you the audience, you could email us at rockpopspod@gmail.com. We are a podcast that airs every Tuesday at every other Tuesday. I don't know, we'll see how many that we put out a week or a month or whatever. John Disalvo, thank you very much for being with us today.
Great to be here.
You want to plug anything, or you have anything that is coming out? John does. He is a synthwave artist with the band Lovers.
Yeah.
You have
Louvers.
Louvers.
Oh, yeah.
I always mispronounce that.
Just at Louvers Music on anything. Instagram at Louvers Music, Bandcamp Louvers Music, .bandcamp.com or whatever it is. Yeah, check it out.
Well, until next time, we will see you soon. And insert default sign off here.